welcome back to Kevin Reviews. I just finished watching The Incredible Hulk 2008. This is by Universal Studios and Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Studios, directed by Louis Leterrier. Probably butchered that. I'm sorry. Written by Zach Penn. The cast includes Edward Norton, Tim Roth, Liv Tyler, William Hurt, and Tim Blake Nelson. So I this is a interesting film and a complicated one to, I think, in a way review because it it is the second MCU film, but this was not well received. It was kind of considered a box office disappointment. Now, don't get me wrong. I think in a way, based on my memory when I first saw it, I remember really enjoying this film. Despite it being the second film and doing some different changes, um, this is vastly superior to the 2003's Ang Lee's Hulk. That's my opinion, though. Um, but again, it does something different, and which I'll later get into. But most people nowadays, I think, just kind of forgotten this film entirely because there hasn't been any other Hulk movies, solo Hulk movies later on, and Hulk is oftentimes in team ups rather than just a solo outing, and as well as the fact that we've moved from Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo, and everyone's more familiar with Mark Ruffalo. I'm still recalling back to the time when I first saw it because I mean I was super excited because of Iron Man and being it was a huge success. I was really looking forward to this one. So maybe I was really overlooking a lot of its flaws um, because it's a second film and this was before we have the entire MCU thing. So it's like I want to give it slack for that because it is the second MCU film. Um, so yeah, I hope to watch this again and see what if my thoughts have changed about the film because in one way or another, after watching it, and I have watched this many times before, I think it was one of those films that I feel like it's a tad underrated because maybe people were looking for something more incredible or maybe or how some of the changes that they did or what they tried to do didn't really match up with the MCU in terms of its tone because this I think for some that I've read it feels like they feel like it is more of the similar comic book movie that we had before the MCU became its thing that it has settled it for its tone because tone overall. But yeah, it's again, this is complicated. It's a complicated movie to explain overall because, in a way, I think I remember really enjoying this, but it didn't work for everybody, or they just thought it was kind of mid to, a shrug. And frankly, the film's budget, I think, was at the time $150 million, and even that didn't get that much of its money back. Or opening weekend, it was his box office disappointment because it had to face up against because this came a month after Iron Man, when Iron Man premiered, and it also had competition with like Wally, um, I Get Smart at the time of release. So there wasn't a lot. Maybe that was its fault that it was picked at the wrong time. And maybe it could also pick the wrong time to actually introduce the Hulk. It could have been saved for much later for something much grander. Um, but whatever. So it is what it is. But after rewatching Hulk, this is my review for the Incredible Hulk. So the story goes is actually the film. I want to say this: the film is actually a sequel, but it is a reboot. So and people like to call this a requel, where instead we don't really see the origin of Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk. We just kind of get a flashback time frame of how he turns into the Hulk, he caused damage, and military is looking for him, and we see till now where he is, how he's trying to control himself, control his anger, like he's wearing a wristwatch to heart rate monitor on his wrist to basically track his heart rate so he can try to stay calm. But basically, continuing with the story, he's trying to find a cure to basically get rid of his Hulk persona. After a mishap um, in Brazil that triggers the U.S. military to come to Brazil to basically hunt him down and bring him back. He managed to escape, but he has to go back to the States to get information to hopefully help him get rid of the Hulk forever. Um, he eventually comes in contact with Elizabeth Ross, played by Liv Tyler, and who was a scientist and worked with Edward Norton, not Edward Norton, Bruce Banner, and they had a relationship at one point. So but yeah, and of course later we got also Emil Blonsky, who plays played by Tim Roth, who later becomes the Abomination. Um, so and yeah, I don't know if it's not much of a huge story. It does seem formulaic overall. I don't know. Personally, I think I do really enjoy it, but I do kind of see it's if if there were no other MCU films before this, I would still think this is great. But now what we have this does feel like an afterthought. This is one you could just simply toss aside and not miss anything, and just continue with Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Thor, and so forth. So this completely is forgotten it's because of how the MCU has changed. Because this just feels like a footnote overall. Personally, I think it is a tad underrated. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's incredible as in the title it says. But for what it is, for what it tried to do, I think it did it fine. And granted, this is from Universal Pictures, not Paramount Pictures or Marvel Studios or Disney at the time. They didn't own the rights to this. So, and granted, it was a disappointment because it had faced other competition. Um, and we probably didn't know at the time that this was going to be, you know, he was going to be part of the Avengers, which later on we get the end cut scene with Tony Stark. Um, so why did this fail ultimately? Um, I, because I think in a way, I think it is clever to do this whole flashback, this requel flashback, to basically just kind of give you a gist of how Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk, and how he goes run to hiding. It seems simple and it gets enough information out, visual storytelling overall. But then again, you could look at it as it it's banking on the fact that you already know who the Hulk is. And granted, I think many of us know who the Hulk is and how Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk. And it's yeah, it's kind of similar to people getting tired of Spider-Man, Peter Parker losing Uncle Ben, and with great power comes great responsibility. People are kind of tired of that in a way, especially in that type of origin story, which is why later on when we have Spider-Man Civil War. Well, it's not the main focus, but Spider-Man Civil War and eventually Homecoming. We don't really see Uncle Ben in that one, or how he became Spider-Man originally. It's just kind of there. So yeah, I, I don't really have a problem with the flashback storytelling to get you caught up, because this is supposed to be a sequel to the Ang Lee's 2003's Hulk, and it does make some changes, because with when Bruce Banner gets the gamma radiation in the 2003 one, he doesn't actually turn into the Hulk initially. He later on turns into the Hulk, but in this one you actually see him really transform into the Hulk and cause damage and even hurt people that he care about, and especially Elizabeth Ross, played by Liv Tyler. And so they do make some changes, and I think they're welcome changes, even if they don't really spend a lot of time with it. Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, I think he does good. He does fine. There isn't really a lot to Bruce Banner in the story other than he is determined to get rid of his persona, the Hulk persona. And you know, but yeah, there's unfortunately, I think the one thing this film doesn't, it does, unfortunately doesn't do, is they really explore the characters more, unlike the later on in the MCU, and even with Iron Man. This just feels like it is a sequel. It's also one of those superhero movies um, that feels like it's the early 2000s superhero movies, but with better CGI effects and overall. Um, and it's a shame because I think in a way the effects the because because I mean I don't know, because again this is a 2008 movie, so maybe I'm just not, either I'm not seeing it, or I'm giving it slack, being generous, because this is a requel to basically from the 2003's Ang Lee's Hulk, and I think it's warranted. I mean, I think people already know how Hulk became, Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk. So yeah, I'm sorry to dwell on that a little bit more, but I I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this. I remember the action being good. There's not that many. There's only like three times Hulk comes into the picture. Um, and oftentimes when Hulk was first seen, you see him in shadow, a lot of shadow and smoke or steam. You don't really get a look except like a silhouette for one point where like a flashbang goes off and the military's after him. Um, and but they eventually did reveal his face, and people didn't really like that reveal. They kind of wish they saved later when eventually a new fight happens in the university. I understand it, but then again, I don't know. We've seen many versions of the Hulk just having that face, this human-like monster, but yet monstrous face. So I don't really know if you're missing that much entirely just because he's revealed too early. Um, would have been epic, sure, probably. I don't know. It didn't really bother me that much. What about the other characters? I think Liv Tyler as Liv Roth is also good. Better replacement than Jennifer Connelly, though oftentimes she likes to whisper talk in this one, though not all the time. I haven't seen Liv Tyler in many other films other than the Lord of the Rings movies, and I don't really remember much of her performance other than the Fellowship of the Ring, where she actually does something action like. But otherwise, she's kind of forgot. She's sort of forgotten in the rest of the trilogy for the most part. I think it. I don't know, but oftentimes she likes to whisper, kind of like whisper talk or speak silently. But then there are times where she does kind of have these outbursts, like trying to get her dad's attention. And then there's even a funny moment involving a taxi going crazy, which I thought was pretty funny. And granted, that's the only one funny thing in the film. And sorry, that's Dottie. I fed her not too long ago. Sorry. Um, in any case, yeah, I think she does fine. It seems like she and Bruce Banner has good chemistry. You know, Edward Norton and Liv Tyler have good chemistry on screen, though it does take in the fact that you taking the notion that you have to know them already, and they look like they actually knew each other for a long time, and still, even Elizabeth Ross feels like still has feelings for Bruce Banner. Um, so I don't know. I think that does fine. It is kind of it is. I think overall this is meant to be more action oriented than story oriented, so that's why it feels generic, and it's trying to get the Hulk into the MCU overall. So I got to pause here. Sorry. So what about the other characters? We have William Hurt as General Ross, the guy who, unlike Sam Elliott, we in the 2003 Sam Elliott character as General Ross, they didn't make it clear whether or not he was wanting the Hulk to as a weapon. And maybe I missed something entirely, but I remember he just kind of wanted to get rid of this Hulk that destroyed him because he was too deep. He was seen as a big threat, and he is. In this one, you have General Ross, who is basically the Captain Ahab to the Hulk's Moby Dick, where the white whale and whatnot. And they said this is the green whale. And I think it works, though that's been done before, especially with, I think the one that comes to mind is uh, Patrick Stewart's role as Captain Picard in Star Trek First Contact. He does do that Moby Dick type of role, and they even addressed it during the story. Um, and I think it works. You know, he's oftentimes really angry that that the Hulk's getting away from him, it's getting the best of him. You see it on his face, but other times he does have feel care about like his daughter's safety, especially when the Hulk is a thing. But he wants um, Elizabeth, his daughter, to basically see what the Hulk is really, what Bruce Banner and the Hulk is really is. A fugitive. He's not doing any good, just being on his own overall. But of course, he doesn't see that, and he just wants to hunt this thing down. Um, then we have Emil Blonsky, played by Tim Roth, who later becomes the Abomination. He's I'm on the fence about, because I think in a way the look and how his character's handled in the story is done well, in terms of because he later gets the super soldier serum drug that later becomes part of the Captain America movie. And he and then it starts to mess with his head, or he starts craving for power because he's a fighter. He's 39 years old, and a fighter. So, and he wants to be a fighter. He wants to be better. He wants to be, take down this Hulk, the one thing that it would prove that he's the best. And that in a way I kind of like, but at the same time, there really isn't a ton to his character, nor does it make him a memorable villain, other than he just wants power. Because we don't have, like, with Killmonger or Thanos or Loki, we don't really have that many of the great MCU villains. And this isn't a great MCU villain really. He's just a guy. He's just a soldier who the drugs makes him want more power, and and yeah, and when we look at the Abomination, I think in a way back then it looks pretty gnarly. It kind of looks unique, though. Granted, it's different than in the comic book version, because he's supposed to be. I think he's supposed to be more scaly. He even has like these fins or ears or whatever. I don't know what they are, but I don't know. I think they could have gone a little bit further with his face in terms of to make it the Abomination that it is. And but I think what it is fine. You get to see kind of, it's like its rib cage sticking out a little bit. You get to see like kind of spikes on his calves, or on his elbows even, um, which are basically bone. Even the spine kind of protrudes from his back. Um, and I don't know. I think it's interesting. And there's like a moment where even Hulk kind of grabs onto the spine and kind of twists it at one point. Um, and then Tim Blake Nelson kind of comes Samuel Stearns, and granted his character's kind of thrown away, because we don't ever see him again later in the MCU till I think later down. I'm not 100% certain, because I've only seen up to Far From Home. Um, so I haven't seen like the shows or anything. Because I think in a way Samuel Stearns is supposed to be the leader, the another Hulk villain, and we don't really get that much out of him really. So, but I think at times he kind of works. He's over exaggerated a little bit, like this, a scientist who's just really kind of like, you know, always about the science, is always like excited and scared, and um, but doesn't care. He just kind of wants to do it because he really enjoys it. He wants to push the limits, without that restraint, um, without much restraint, really. He does have a little bit of restraint, but not a ton. Um, I think action is still good. Granted, it's nothing that incredible. Aside from a couple things, like, I mean, we get a moment where Hulk, um, basically smashes the Earth, and it causes cracks. But We've kind of sort of seen that in, I think, 2003's Ang Lee, though it's not really directed or it shown. It's just kind of it exactly. But we do see him talk a little bit more in this one. Again, not a ton. The effects now I don't think hold up that well. Um, Sorry, that was just my computer. Um, but I mean, I gotta give it some slack because this is 2008, and maybe, and I don't know. I like the look of the Hulk in general because he looks like he's a bit more gritty than he was and cartoony in the first and the Ang Lee's version. Um, he kind of looks a little bit more menacing. Um, I think a lot of that is the face, the eyes looking angry, or the teeth just look wide and you can like see it all. Like and there's like black stuff over him. Um, I don't know. I don't know how to explain the effects because I'm not a special effects wizard. No, I nor do I can definitely I cannot describe effects very well. Um, but yeah, I think I remember liking it. I remember liking it fine. The other thing I wish they could have explored was that Roth, Elizabeth Ross has a husband who isn't in the film very long. He's not an integral part of the story. But I don't know. I kind of wish there was a moment where, you know, uh, Bruce Banner and meets up with her husband and, kind of have a talk because, you know, at one point I thought that, you know, he was going to be jealous to basically be jealous because it it was Elizabeth's Betty Ross's um, you know ex lover or whatever, and she seems to have feelings for him, but at the same time he kind of sees the stuff that Bruce Banner's going through, and he hopes that his that Elizabeth helps him, Betty helps him, Bruce, to get rid of the Hulk entirely. So I don't know. I kind of wish there was that more. I wish there was more, moments where we can actually see Hulk and Banner kind of fighting internally, kind of for control. Um, I like the idea of we see more of Bruce Banner trying to find ways to basically control his anger, though it doesn't really often pay off very well. Um, because we want to see the Hulk, we don't want to see him like completely, without it. So I don't know. I don't know. I remember having fun. I didn't really care if the story is very light or very formulaic or the action is not incredible. I mean, I think because it is the second MCU film and I give it slack. But yeah, is it the best? It's not. It's not my top 10. It's not my top 5 even. Um, I don't know, but I think it's fine. I think it's a tad underrated. I think overall I give this a 3.5, and I would probably put this in a B tier, low B, high C, because I think in a way it is good enough for what it is. But yes, it is pretty forgettable. I think it would be interchangeable. I would either put it in B or C. I think B though because I still do enjoy it for what it is and give me a good time. So yeah. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the Incredible Hulk? Leave in the comments below. Leave a like or dislike the review if you wish. Click the notification. Click the Feel free to subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so you can be updated on any more videos. And I will see you guys in the next review. Bye.